This is a list of alternative base character classes to the Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game. As base classes rather than prestige classes, they can be taken by newly created characters without need for any prerequisites. Many of these classes have been repeatedly added after the core rules books were released, including the shaman, artificer, and runecaster, a runepriest. Original Dungeons & Dragons. 2 new classes were introduced after the release of the original D&D box set: Thieves in Supplement I, Greyhawk and Bards in the Strategic Review. New subclasses were introduced in Supplement I: Greyhawk, Supplement 2, Blackmoor, Supplement 3, Eldritch Wizardry and the Strategic Review. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 1st Edition. 5 standard base classes and 5 subclasses were offered in the Player's Handbook, with an optional 6th base class, the Bard, presented in an appendix. Additionally, various alternative base classes, subclasses and rule changes were offered in the magazine Dragon and elsewhere, such as the Mystic and the Witch. Eventually, some of these alternative rules came to be compiled in 1985 in the volume Unearthed Arcana. Among other changes, it included the Thief Acrobat, a thief subclass, and a Barbarian, a fighter subclass which had abilities such as summoning a horde of fellow barbarians to any location. Unearthed Arcana also included the Cavalier class as alignment champions, and reworked Paladins to be a subclass of Cavalier. The Thief Acrobat, Barbarian, and Cavalier had previously appeared in Dragon magazine. Many existing classes were also drastically reworked and given different abilities. The Barbarian and Cavalier both had revised treatment in Dragon magazine number 148. The other major book that offered new base classes was the 1985 version of Oriental Adventures. It included the Bushi, Kensai, Ninja, Samurai, Shukenya, Sohei, Wugen, and Yakuza. Dragonlance Adventures presented alternative classes for Knights of Solemnia and Wizards of High Sorcery, as well as the Tinker class, which is exclusive to gnomes. NPCs. Most NPCs did not technically have a class in 1st and 2nd edition. They were, instead, 0th level characters, or hirelings. Most classes gained the ability to attract and recruit hirelings at 9th level and later. Others could be hired for a fee. Their abilities were not normally laid out very specifically, leaving more to the dungeon master's improvisation. 1st edition did have a few quasi-classes, which acted in a similar fashion. For example, humanoids could become shamans and witch doctors, which were functionally equivalent to clerics and cleric magic uses, except highly limited in terms of maximum level advancement. Basic Dungeons & Dragons. Basic Dungeons & Dragons introduced 2 alternative classes: the Druid, an option for advancing a cleric character, and a Mystic, a counterpart to a D&D's Monk. Optional classes from other books include Dervish, Elf, Wizard, Treekeeper, Dwarf, Cleric, Wise Woman, Master, Merchant, Prince, Kobold, Goblin, Orc, Hobgoblin, Gnoll, Bugbear, Ogre, Troll, Merchant, Shaman, Shadow Elf, Shaman, Shamany. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition. AD&D 2nd Edition introduced a large number of alternative classes in various supplemental handbooks, which also introduced a variety of kits to customize each base class. These kits would grant certain new special abilities at the cost of various restrictions. On occasion, the concept of class versus kit seemed to blur. For example, the Shire of Al-Qadim was introduced as a wizard kit, but it had very different abilities from other wizards, and an alternative system of spell casting, which warranted it being a class, and not a mere kit. It was treated as its own class in the release of the complete Shaman's Handbook. As can be seen on the lists below, 2nd edition had far more alternative classes than 1st edition, and provided significant flexibility with dozens of kits. The most common type of variant class was the specialty priests, which applied to almost all settings. Rules for specialty priests were in the 2nd edition player's handbook, with the druid offered as an example, and many campaign settings offered detailed abilities and domains for specialty priests of the deities. 2nd edition alternative class. 2nd edition kits. Character kits were conceived as a way for players to customize a class. A character kit is a collection of minor modifications to the standard rules. They tended to reflect culture, race, social class, or vocation. Kit repetition was also not unheard of. Some kit names were used multiple times, occasionally with different descriptions, such as the diplomat. Kits and classes also sometimes duplicated themselves. For example, the shaman appeared in at least 6 products. 3rd and 3.5 editions. Dungeon Master's Guide. In its Dungeon Master's Guide, 3rd edition introduced 5 NPC classes not intended for player use. These were the first official alternative base classes, and still the only ones detailed in the core 3 books. All 5 of these classes were retained in the 3.5 edition Dungeon Master's Guide. Other sourcebooks. The following base classes were introduced in other sourcebooks. Unless otherwise specified, all sourcebooks are for 3.5 edition. Core class variants. These are alternative versions of core base classes. Campaign settings specific. The Dragonlance campaign setting update for 3rd edition includes 2 alternative base classes, while further sourcebooks developed by Sovereign Press Margaret Weiss Productions Limited introduce Masters, Mariners, and Night Talkers. Alternative base classes presented in the 3.5 edition Eberron campaign setting include: the Al-Qadim setting was not extensively supported in 3rd edition, but issue 315 of Dragon magazine includes an update to the Shah base class from earlier editions. The 3rd edition version of Oriental Adventures was set in Rokugan, the setting of Legend of the Five Rings. However, many of the classes in Oriental Adventures were used in other settings as well, and some were reprinted in other books independently. Alternative classes created for that book include the Samurai, Shaman, Shuganya, Sohei, and Wujen. See above. Generic classes. The 2004 release of Unearthed Arcana for 3.5 edition included 3 generic base classes: Warrior, Spellcaster, and Expert. These classes cover 3 basic archetypes without any frills and are easily modified. However, these classes were not recommended for use with the standard base classes. The Warrior is similar to the Fighter, with hit points and a strong attack but few skills. The Expert has a large variety of skills but middling combat capabilities, and the Spellcaster has little combat capabilities but the ability to cast spells. Many class features from the core base classes, such as Familiar, Sneak Attack, and Turn Undead, are available to the 3 generic base classes as bonus feats. Psionics-related psionics in 3rd edition were originally detailed in Psionics Handbook. 2nd edition had only 1 character class, the Psionicist. 3rd edition renamed it the Psion and introduced various new alternative classes based on psionics usage. Psionics Handbook was later updated for version 3.5 with the expanded Psionics Handbook, and new material was added in the complete Psionic book. 4th edition. Multi-class only classes. These classes are only available through multi-classing. They cannot be chosen as a character's main class. 5th edition. No official base classes beyond the Player's Handbook and Sword Coast Adventure Guide have been released for the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons as of July 2015, but the Dungeon Master's Guide contains alternate class options for the Cleric and Paladin. However, the article series, Unearthed Arcana on the Wizards of the Coast website, has presented several class options as playtest material. These include a version of the Artificer as a wizard archetype, a version of the Ranger class without magical abilities, a version of the Favored Soul as a sorcerer archetype, a version of the Swashbuckler as a rogue archetype, and a Storm Sorcerer archetype. Another Unearthed Arcana article presented a playtest version of Psionics rules for the 5th edition, in the form of a class called the Mystic. Unearthed Arcana introduced the Rune Scribe as the first prestige class.